So I made a promise the other day that I'm not going to cower for the YouTube bot, because you see, a lot of the time YouTube promotes negative content. Basically, YouTube wants to make you as depressed as you possibly can be. But I actually want to change that. I'm going to tell you stuff that I like. If you don't want to hear that, you can move on with your life. When I buy a book, there are stuff that I want to see in that book. What are those? Well, number one, but before we get to that, I do daily uploads. Please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate if you can subscribe. I honestly appreciate when the author is not being a dog and they're not shoving stuff in our face. Fantasy authors are notorious for doing this. They will shove a mountain load of world building into the story that is currently, as it is, irrelevant for your experience. Like, for you to understand the story, for you to follow the story, you don't need all of that world building. But you know what they're going to do? They will shove all of that into your mouth, into your eyes, because it's considered normal, because we have to build epic worlds for the story to be epic fantasy or something like that. And I abhor when authors do this, and I especially love it when authors don't do this. I actually recently saw this in Lives of Locke Lamora, because I finished it sometime, I think 14th March, the first book. And guess what? In that particular story, Scott Lynch does not shove a lot of world building that is unnecessary into your, eyes, right? He does not waste your time. And I love it when authors do not have irrelevant stuff included into the story. If you are a writer, include in the story right now what I need to follow the story. If you include stuff that I will need book 3 or stuff that is relevant for book 3, I'm going to be really pissed off, and you're going to really piss me off. And if you don't do that, to me, you are a legend. To me, it means you respect the reader enough to write a story that you think will engage the reader's attention for what it currently is, not for what it can be, not for what it was 10,000 years ago, and not for what it will be in 3 books. You see? Do not include irrelevant stuff in the story. Include stuff that is relevant for the story. The second one will actually surprise you. Tragedy. I love tragedy. I don't know why, but I must have a tragic element in my heroes. If you are writing a story and you have a tragic element to your characters, to your protagonist, even your villain, it doesn't matter. Like, maybe your villain, they lost the entire family or something like that, and it drove them angry, or it makes them mad and they want revenge or something like that. I hate it when the protagonist and the struggles they face are mostly cookie cutter and it's not tragic. I love George R. R. Martin for this. He does this a lot within A Song of Ice and Fire, where we have, Ned Stark, we have Jon Snow, we have Tyrion Lannister, we have Tywin Lannister, we have Jaime Lannister, a lot of Lannisters. All of these characters are tragic heroes. And I love when heroes and villains and stories in general have tragic elements. And in my books, I love that. My sister was kidnapped and I have to save her. But what if my sister was eaten by a group of demons and I have to, go and kill them? Like, that is much better, instead of rescuing your sister from the tower or something like that, right? I love tragedy. I love George R. R. Martin, basically. A recent one that I come to really love and appreciate, especially because of Peaky Blinders, especially because of Breaking Bad, and especially because of Lies of Locke Lamora and Locke from Gentleman Bastards. I love when anti-heroes are done well. I love it when anti-heroes are done well. So many times, anti-heroes are just not executed well a lot of the time. Deadpool from the comic books is one of my not the movies. Deadpool from the comic books is one of my favorite, specifically because one of my favorite Marvel heroes, specifically because he is such a good anti-hero. And I love when an anti-hero is executed well, because they are so interesting. Take a conventional hero and multiply it by 100 times. That is what a well-done anti-hero is. That is how engaging a well-written anti-hero is. I abhor it when authors and writers don't really put a lot of effort into the anti-heroes, because guess what? This can be the most interesting part of your story, and you're not really putting effort into it. And that is just, to me, why? This can really become the most interesting part of your story, yet you are not putting any effort into it. Why? Anti-heroes are amazing, they have to be utilized more, and I love them. I love when there is a clever spin on something familiar. In other words, the premise of the story is a clever spin. It's a slight deviation from the norm. So don't necessarily go like, complete bazooka and kill everything that is familiar, right? Don't have a 100% unique story. I don't like 100% unique. And in fact, the best stories I have ever read were stories where the authors took effort to have a clever premise, a clever slight spin on something that already exists. And this to me is very, very good. For instance, weather and seasons in A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, they like one season might be your entire life. They're really long. Some children are born in winter and they die in winter. Naming from Name of the Wind, where you can utilize and control something because you know its true name. You know the true name, you can utilize it and use it. I just love, like for instance in Rosha, another example just came to my head. Rosha, there's like high storms that are roaming the planet, and they are cyclically roaming the planet. And it really creates a lot of tension, and Brandon Sanderson uses it very cleverly in order to tell his story and to carry natural conflict. I can basically go on always and indefinitely, but the point is you have to have like a clever spin and on something very familiar. Like something very familiar, clever spin equals boom. I have to read your book even if I have never read any of your books. I have to read your book even if I don't like you. Like, I will honestly pick up a book if I don't like you because your premise for this one book is good. That's how much I love them. And that is generally something I love to see in my books. I love friends to enemies. Like, I love, Zuko and Aang from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Actually, I love it when there is this particular spin on a relationship between characters. They start out as enemies, or tragedy, they start out as friends, and over the story they become enemies, and in fact they become mortal enemies, and they might end up killing each other. And I will really love it big time if they end up killing each other and they started out as best friends. That's the perfect tragedy. As I told you, I love tragedies. Friends to enemies, enemies to friends. Shuffle back and forth, it doesn't matter. I will literally swallow your story if it has something like this. I would like to hear what are your favorite stuff, your favorite tropes in movies or in books, wherever, anime, it doesn't matter, anime. So I do daily uploads. Please consider subscribing, and if you do consider subscribing, bless you, bless your heart. Have a nice day.